There is no way that he just said this is following the most heartbreaking loss of the year so far for the Toronto Blue Jays against the Mets. John Schneider is under fire by Jays fans, and he came out and said some very interesting things surrounding his decisions, not only in yesterday's game, but he also gave some insight into what his decisions will look like going forward. We're going to dive into those exact comments as well as discuss multiple surprising Jays updates and a big update surrounding George Springer following his injury yesterday. So a ton to go over today ahead of this afternoon's game. But before we get into it, if you're a part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Jays content. Your guys' support has been absolutely unbelievable. If you want to help us towards our big goal of 20,000 subscribers, make sure the subscribe button is the place to be for daily Jays content. Ladies and gentlemen, the Jays are coming off of the most heartbreaking loss of the season. Now it's a new day. We can move on to the game today, and hopefully the Jays can win this one. They need to salvage the series here, win one game, improve to 6-4. The AL is struggling. The Jays are one of only 4 teams, I believe, that are above 500 at the time of recording. It's a crazy time of the year. But what's not crazy is the fact that the Toronto Blue, or what is crazy, sorry, is the fact that John Schneider made some interesting decisions yesterday. He came out and revealed a bunch of different things. First of all, shout out to Keegan Matheson. He was on our show. He asked the hard-hitting questions, and he did to John Schneider once again in yesterday's interview meeting. He said, or interview post-game, and he said, ask John Schneider with the bullpen decisions after tonight's loss in the post-game interviews. He trusted Brendan Little and thought Little struck Winker out on the check swing, which he absolutely did. The umpires were not only terrible, they were one of the reasons that the Jays lost the game. I don't think they were the reason, but they were one of the biggest reasons the Jays lost the game. You can check out my video last night if you want to see that. But you can see this here. He said, we're asking guys to fit into their spots. Late, there were pitches between both Brendan and Nick they probably want back. Talking about, of course, Nick Sandlin and Brendan Little. And this is interesting, sorry, excuse me, because it's at the point now where the Toronto Blue Jays are in a very interesting spot, right? In the game yesterday, they had relievers that were ready to come in, thinking, most notably Jeff Hoffman when, Nick Sandlin was out there, but even Brendan Little. You could have easily kept Jimmy Garcia in the game. There was no doubt about it. You could have kept him in. He would have been fine. Everything would have been good there. But they decided not to. They didn't want to keep, Jimmy Garcia in the game. And that's what happens. And he basically just went on to say, John Schneider, we're asking guys to fit in their spot. And it is a little bit on Ross Atkins. They don't have a reliable bullpen right now by any means. And he said he would have pushed Garcia into the next inning, or may have, if he'd been more efficient. Of course, Jimmy Garcia wasn't looking good in the game yesterday anyways. He had his velocity was down to 94. Buck Martinez and Dan Shulman mentioned it on the broadcast, and Dan was basically saying the velocity is down. Whether that was a matter of Jimmy Garcia not getting, I think if he would have came out in the next inning, which would have been the 8th inning, Jimmy Garcia would have been perfectly fine, right? I think he would have been fine with his velocity. But again, like Dan said, and like everybody was mentioning, 94 miles per hour, Jimmy's been up in the 98s, and I think he's touched 99, this year. But I think it was just maybe 98 was his max. Regardless, they should have brought him in. But John Schneider goes on to defend some of his other moves. We're counting on guys to get the outs we think they're going to get. They walked Siri. The walk to Siri didn't help. Then a base hit. We wanted Jeff at the top there. So he's obviously talking about in the top of the 9th when you have Nick Sandlin out there. They waited till the top of the order against Lindor to put in Jeff Hoffman. And of course, that was with a man on 1st and 3rd following a walk to José Siri and then a base hit to left field. 1st and 3rd, 1 out. And then you bring in Jeff Hoffman. I think if you're going to bring in Jeff Hoffman, I'm curious to see now that we've had some time to kind of digest this loss a little bit, what you guys would have done here. I don't love the decision by John Schneider to have Brendan Little in the first place. I would have preferred to keep Jimmy Garcia in. Now, in the 9th inning, I definitely would have just put Jeff Hoffman in. There's no doubt about that. You think about and you look at what the Mets did. They had Edwin Diaz in for the top of the 9th inning. In the bottom of the 9th, I would have just put in, you can even match what the Mets were doing. The Mets obviously did that because, A, he's one of the best relievers in baseball, but you want to shut down the Jays lineup. You want to shut down the order. And they almost got, they put themselves in a position to be able to score around on the top of the 9th. They ultimately didn't. You put out Jeff Hoffman down there in the bottom of the 9th. I think there's a real world where that game is going to extra innings. And then from there with the Manfred runner, you don't really know what's going to happen. So very frustrating loss. And it was one that John Schneider, I think, is at the forefront to blame here. I think, obviously, number one, you have to blame the offense. The offense did not come to play. They did not score with runners in scoring position. They didn't do any of that. And then the bullpen decisions, like just even after, a few hours, 12 hours of, thinking about it, or maybe a bit less than that, he should have done better. I still don't agree with his decisions. And that's something we're going to obviously be debating all season long with John Schneider. And as you do with any manager, is those decisions. Chris Bassitt spoke out on the game as well about pitching so well tonight through the cold and wet weather. It was obviously rainy in New York. He said, I guess my offseason program, being out in the woods all the time helps me a little bit. The cold doesn't bother me. It is what it is. Chris Bassitt is truly one of one. He is such a gem. And I want to highlight this. I didn't highlight it as much in yesterday's video as I probably should have. Chris Bassitt was fantastic in yesterday's game. Like, fantastic. 6 and 2/3 innings, 9 Ks against one of the better top of the lineups, at least in baseball, with Lindor. You have Pete Alonso, you have Juan Soto, all these guys. Mark Vientos, albeit off to a very slow start. Chris Bassitt was an absolute animal, and he is. He's a fantastic pitcher. And the fact that the Jays lost that game when you got as good of a start as you did against Chris Bassitt, those are the wins that you need to have this early in the season. You're not going to get many games like that where your third starter pitches elite, an elite game like they did. And the Jays just aren't hitting home runs. You can see this here. The Blue Jays are tied for 4 others teams for the fewest home runs in the league with 5. The margin for error will continue to be razor thin until they find a way to hit more baseballs over more fences, especially with runners on base. We saw it yesterday. All singles. Even in the games they won, it's all singles or doubles. You need to be able to hit for power. That is something that they brought in Anthony Santander for, who's looked horrible. Bichette hasn't found his power. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is without a home run. Your cleanup hitters, Andres Jimenez, who's leading the team in home runs. It's going to be a very interesting next few weeks. See how the top of the order hits, because I think there's still some optimism there. If the top of the order can figure it out, the Jays will be in a very, very good spot. Speaking of a good spot, Alan Roden, he had a fantastic game yesterday. Of course, desperately hit some home runs here. The Jays need to hit home runs, but Alan Roden has been a very pleasant surprise. Now, I want to dive into a couple of different things here. We have an update surrounding George Springer. He's having lower back spasms, not scheduling an MRI or anything, just with the way he hit the wall and it being a cold night. George Springer update from John Schneider. This is the most fantastic news from late last night, right? George Springer is good to go. He is going to, I presume, maybe get an off day today, though it is against a lefty, so they might try to get him back in there. But regardless, George Springer is going to be good to go. They're not going for any further testing. He hit the wall hard, had a spasm. He is good to go. Do you wish you would have made the play? Probably. That probably would have won the Jays the game. But he's been the Jays' hottest hitter, and you cannot afford to lose anybody right now. So in a game that turned into a disaster yesterday, coming out and having a fantastic injury update like this helps, put the loss a little bit to rest. And again, the baseball is an extremely long season, right? The MLB 162 games. You have to come out tomorrow or today, sorry, and win the game. You just have to. You put yesterday behind you, and you look forward to today's game. And if today's game goes south, you look forward to the next game. But they need to at least salvage one of these games with Bound and Francis on the hill. And you can see this here. The Blue Jays need some things to break their way if they want to compete this year. The manager botching bullpen deployment in a winnable game after a gem from a starter just can't happen when the margin for error is this thin. And it goes back to the John Schneider thing. He needs to be better. He needs to realize the bullpen you have. But at the same time, Russ Atkins did not give him a fantastic bullpen. And the team also needs to hit for power. There hasn't been home runs. There hasn't been clutch hitting. The average is starting to tail off a little bit now, aside from George Springer and Bichette. It's going to be interesting to see what happens going forward. But ladies and gentlemen, that'll wrap it up. Let me know down below what your thoughts are. Again, shout out to Chris Bassitt, one of the more impressive games we've seen thus far. Let me know down below what your thoughts are on John Schneider's comments, and hopefully the Jays will win today's game. We'll have a video following the game, so make sure to stay tuned for that. And thank you guys for your continued support, and also thank you guys for bearing with me through my cold here. It's been pretty rough, but if you guys are enjoying the videos, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thank you guys for watching.